Hali kweli ilikuwa ni mbaya. Ukame ilitusumbua sana. Ile ukame ilikuwa ni hatari. Tumehamia hapa, tumekaa kama wiki 2. Tuliua ng'ombe kwa njiani, kwa tunahama mizoga mingi njia yote hii. Mpaka tumefika kule tumefika tumeua ng'ombe. Isingekuwa sio hiyo majani ya pori ya Randilen, hao ng'ombe wangekuwa na hali mbaya sana. Lakini ilitusaidia sana hiyo majani kuwepo.
You have just heard from a pastoralist from the Naitolia village, a member of the Randilen Wildlife Management Area. This is a story of how a community has integrated a tourism and wildlife conservation model with a communal grazing plan that will help them adapt to climate change. My name is Damian. I work in Tanzania for the Honeyguide Foundation, an organization that guides communities to develop innovative and entrepreneurial solutions to the conservation of wildlife and natural resources. Let's go back in time a little to get some context here. First, we have to understand that wildlife in Tanzania needs large landscapes in order to survive. The national parks are not fenced and do not protect these entire ecosystems. Wildlife extends beyond the boundaries of these parks in search of food and water. They move onto village land that is owned by local communities who are living adjacent to these parks, sometimes spending up to 60% of their time outside these parks on village land. The future of wildlife in Tanzania depends on local communities. The Tanzanian government recognized the importance of the local community's role in conservation and established wildlife management areas in 2012. These are the mechanisms for communities to benefit from this wildlife. They were developed to incentivize communities to engage in wildlife conservation. A wildlife management area is established when several villages that have allocated land in their land use plans for grazing areas, forestry, or any other activities that preserve their natural resources. They then collaborate to form a wildlife management area. In 2015, 8 villages in the Monduli district, northern Tanzania, set aside 31,000 hectares of land and formed the Randilen Wildlife Management Area on the eastern boundary of the Tarangire National Park. Wildlife from Tarangire National Park disperses across Randilen Wildlife Management Area and the adjacent village lands in search of food and water. It is important to understand that although these wildlife management areas are designed to provide benefits, some wildlife that does disperse onto village lands causes a financial loss, such as elephants' raids on farmers' crops. Randilen is somewhat of a social business, where communities are the shareholders and the tourism investors are their customers. Randilen has 4 tourism properties that attract tourists to visit Randilen and its beautiful habitat and wildlife. They all pay a daily conservation fee for the privilege to be there. These revenues generated from tourism provide the community the financial means to run the business operations of the wildlife management area. These include natural resource protection, the maintenance of roads, and the security for tourism investors. But critical is the governance and management to make sure that the wildlife management area can operate efficiently as well as provide value services for their community. In Randilen, the community value Randilen for three main services: the provision of a quality grazing area, a crop protection program, and funds to support local development projects. These communities are predominantly pastoralists, and so the most valued service is the provision of a quality grazing bank. The Randilen people have decided that their rangelands are to be used for the dry season only. Their livelihoods depend on the ability to move across communal grazing lands with their livestock in search of grass and water. Please refer to the map where the dry season grazing areas are seen as yellow and the wet season grazing areas are seen as green. They live in homesteads that are called bomas. They are protected by a thorn fence where their livestock live in the center of a reinforced central enclosure to protect them from wildlife attacks at night. During the day, they must be vigilant at all times, as they can lose their livestock to predators such as lions and leopards. However, the biggest challenge is finding grass for their livestock. This is the grass inside the wildlife management area, which becomes available during the dry season and is critical for the community's response to climate change and more frequent droughts. During the rainy season, when grass grows, the livestock remain nearer to the boma and on communal lands managed by the village. Randilen Wildlife Management Area protects the grass bank for leaner times, and the rangers are on patrol daily to ensure no illegal grazing takes place. As the season moves towards drier times, Randilen will open the grazing bank for the community to bring their livestock into the grazing bank daily. This management approach provides equitable and sustainable use of this rangeland for their community. This is where the revenues for tourism come in. They support the community's ability to come together and meet and decide on their grazing needs. There is a governance structure for the rangelands within each village that consists of a member of each village that belongs to a grazing committee, who then jointly decide on the grazing movements inside and outside the wildlife management area. The wildlife management area has been divided into grazing blocks, and these are then subdivided further into zones. The grazing committee will decide when a block is open and how the rotation of the livestock will move within the block. These tourism revenues support a management team and their rangers. It is the rangers' job to patrol the wildlife management area and ensure that their grazing plan is being followed. If they find any illegal grazing taking place, they will call in the grazing committee member to follow up on any control measures or fines. These tourism revenues also support members of the grazing committee to regularly monitor their rangelands and feed the data into a tool such as Kobo Collect, which can be managed by the Randilen management team. Researchers have evidence that wildlife numbers are increasing in such areas while livestock numbers remain stable. This is a successful community-led conservation model where wildlife and people are interdependent, that they have a future together. Without funds from tourism, these communities would not have the resources to come together, discuss and agree to manage and monitor their rangelands for both their community and to continue to provide grass for their traditional reciprocal grazing agreements. According to a survey administered to 678 individuals across Randilen's 8-member villages in 2020, over 70 respondents supported the wildlife management area. The Randilen communities cherish their wildlife management area and its crucial role in securing their livelihoods and protecting their land. The added value here is that these herders reduce the cost of operating these wildlife management areas and help them to become financially sustainable as well. Protection is an extremely expensive occupation. Salaries for rangers, food, fuel, vehicles, training, the list is endless, and often consume over 60% of their annual operating budget. For most areas, expect the cost of protection to be anything from $300 to $500 per square kilometer. Developing community-based models such as Randilen, it is in their interest to reduce this cost and divert those funds to community development. This is where your herder is critical for this model. Fewer rangers means less operating costs. It's simple: less food, vehicles, training, and everything. Generally, it is seen as the ranger's job to go on patrol looking for poachers or signs of illegal activity. However, if you have herders moving across the rangelands, and it is in their interest to protect this model, then anyone who threatened this model, including poachers who are seen, are reported to the Randilen management team. The herders become the rangers, and the rangers just need to act as firemen, waiting to be called upon and not having to spend resources to patrol. In Randilen, their costs for protection are around $288 per square kilometer. And in Makame Wildlife Management Area, a similar model of over 370,000 hectares, they have reduced the cost of protection down to $22 per square kilometer. This approach enables the wildlife management area to divert their funds to investments that support the community's livelihoods and thus continue to foster community support for their conservation initiative. In Randilen, a key conservation initiative is where the local community have established a crop protection program. This uses a specially designed crop protection toolkit that focuses on reducing the elephant's ability to be able to raid crops at night. There are 3 elements to this toolkit: a flashlight that focuses on the visual ability of the elephants at night, often with a strobe function, a horn or a siren that will impact their ability to hear where the farmers might be, and finally a chili cracker that is thrown in the sky and explodes and puts chili powder everywhere and affects their ability to be able to follow the scent of any of the farmers. They also depend on the support from the rangers in Randilen, where the rangers often station their vehicles during the crop harvesting period to be able to provide a backup to these communities if they need a vehicle backup for problem elephants. This strategy builds a rapport amongst the farmers and the rangers, a trust between them. And this as well provides the ability for the rangers and the farmers to connect and build information and intelligence on any illegal activity. This crop protection program has reduced crop damage by elephants by 90%. This initiative is providing their community with improved food security, and the farmers have not reverted to methods in the past that often resulted in the killing of elephants. No elephants have been killed in retaliation for over 5 years in Randilen. It is looking at community-led conservation at multiple angles, where all strategies must make sense for the community and their livelihoods, and that this leads to zero or reduced poaching. There has been no poaching in Randilen since 2016. Community-based conservation is a business. It does depend on revenues. There are several ways communities can make money, such as tourism, carbon. But in the end, as a business that is owned by the communities, where these communities expect a return on their investment, they've invested this land, they've invested this grazing lands, these rangelands. And we can expect, if they have made such investments into conservation, that they should have a return on this investment. And this must lead to a secured future for climate change, that must lead to improving their livelihoods. And only when we see conservation as a tool to improve their livelihoods will we see a future for conservation in these large landscapes in Africa. The herder has already played their role in the past at delivering these landscapes as they are today.
Randilen inatusaidia sisi. Imetuinua, kusema kweli imetuinua. Hatujapoteza mifugo mingi. Japo wako waliopoteza, lakini hali ya mifugo naona iko vizuri kabisa. Naona mifugo sasa hivi yanang'aa. Yanapendeza. Kutokana na hii majani ina nguvu sana. Ni majani ambayo ilitusaidia kuanzia mwanzo mpaka sasa hivi naendelea kutusaidia. Ingekuwa sio wenyewe mifugo tusingekuwa nayo. Ni ile tungesema tu labda benki ya Masai ingeungua moto. Tunashukuru kweli tumepata kipindi kama hii. Tunatarajia wangeongeza nguvu ili kipindi kingine cha kiangazi tusaidie pia. Na mpaka sasa hivi sijaona hao watu askari wa WMO wakiwa wanatusumbua. Bado tunaruhusiwa kwa sasa, sababu mifugo bado haijapata nguvu. Tunaruhusiwa kula majani, tunatumia hii majani paka pale watakaposema basi.